fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds, back again. Got my main man, Justin Ritchey. What's up, brother?
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing great. We're going to talk about why most inshore anglers fail in their very first and maybe second and maybe even third and maybe even fourth tournament. And this is coming from someone who's done a lot of tournaments, who's won a ton of tournaments, even went to the Hobie World. It's like going to the Olympics for kayak fishing. And it wasn't always easy for you though, right? Like you had some pretty, maybe, was it embarrassing the right word, or some just pitiful?
Oh my gosh. I had to crawl at a snail's pace before I could run. I have made so many mistakes. If I could go back 6-7 years ago and just not necessarily like where to go and what to use and where the fish were, but if I could just, if I could go back and make some changes to how I approached being on the water, my mental state and my plan, I could have gone home with a lot more cash in my pocket and just been that much better. So there's a lot to unravel here, and I love talking about this. It's cool. I'm ready, man.
Yeah. And so in this podcast episode, we are going to talk about, the best types of spots and even how long to fish those spots. That's the question I know a lot of people ask is, all right, it's tournament day. Like how long should I stay in a spot before I move? And types of lures and just everything you could possibly imagine about the tactical side of things. But we're also going to talk about just the stuff in your head and even just like flat out mistakes that most people have no idea could even like disqualify you from a tournament, because that's the worst. And I've seen so many people who actually I don't know if they get lucky or not. There's part of it is luck, but they have like an amazing first tournament and they get disqualified. Like they would have been in second, third place their very first tournament, even first sometimes. And they get disqualified because they didn't either go to the captain's meeting or they were barely there and just playing on their phone and just had no idea what just even some of the basic rules were. So before we get into that, do you mind kind of sharing who you are? And some people obviously who've followed the last few podcasts know that Justin is now full-time here with Salt Strong. He is both a fishing coach. He's going to see him a lot in terms of being in front of the camera and offering advice because the dude knows how to fish. And number two, he's the head of our tackle. So he's the guy in charge of going out and getting all of the tackle that you see at fishstrong.com. And a lot of really cool stuff coming now that we have Justin full-time here doing all that. So what's the quick backstory and when did you get into tournament fishing and kind of the overall results and you could tell some funny stories about the Swedish. Who was the group that you were kind of poking at last time?
The Aussies. The Aussies. Oh man, guys, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry. I mean, you're hardcore, but I don't mean to leave you in the dust out there that day. So born and raised here in Orlando, Florida. Fell into kayak fishing big time in college because it was an economical way to get on the water and target everything. And I fell in love with the freedom that I had kayak fishing. I could just go out by myself and get a whole bunch of fish on the flats. I could drive all over Florida and launch anywhere that I wanted to that was legal and I had access to. And I got into tournaments, I think shortly after college, a year or two after in 2011 or 2012, and was in a regular paddle kayak, competed in a few here and there. And I didn't do so well. I mean, I knew how to catch redfish and big snook and trout and could figure out areas that I've had success in and kind of match it up with where I'm going to be launching and, what the tides were. I tried to put all the math together, but it didn't seem to pan out. It was right around 2014 when I had a lot of big life changes. I started working out, was in the best shape of my life. I had a completely different mental state. And I went into things with a really, really detailed plan. I said, if I'm going to go into a tournament, I'm going to give it 110% effort. I'm going to plan ahead of time exactly where I'm going to be, what I'm going to use for how long. It was just this map. I mean, it was like a chaotic, drawing board of all the things that went into my plan when going into a tournament. And that was around the time that I got into a Hobie kayak. And that was a big strategic move for me from a tournament standpoint. Was in a regular paddle kayak, a lot of area during tournament season, you've got a window in early spring, late winter time frame, which we're coming up. This is about the time that tournaments start, ramping up, at least for redfish tournaments inshore. And you're going to be fighting the wind. You're going to be fighting elements. You're going to have rain. I mean, a tournament wouldn't be a tournament unless the weather was garbage. It's just how it goes. And a lot of times in a paddle kayak, whether you're heading back to the ramp or you're heading to a spot, you're fighting the elements and you're spending that much time and energy. And it just wears you down mentally and physically. And I didn't want things getting in the way when I knew I had a way around it. And that was using a pedal driven kayak, a native or a Hobie. And I went with a Hobie because the fins would, if you alternate the foot pedals, they'll go up flush underneath the kayak. So I could get in very, very shallow areas and still half flutter or half kick. Tony's talked about it before in other videos, to still cruise along the flats and have my hands free to cast. So I spent half the energy pedaling against the elements. I could still have my hands free to make a cast, because even in a 10-second window, that 10-second window could be, worth thousands of dollars in a fish. I wanted everything to work for me and all of my tools be very specifically chosen to any tournament that I'm doing. And shortly after getting a Hobie kayak and competing in my first tournament in a Hobie kayak was an IFA tournament in Punta Gorda. And I got disqualified, which was super embarrassing. And that's kind of the first thing I'd like to jump into with everybody about why do people fail at tournaments? How does somebody go from, zero to hero, or go from, not placing at all to getting top 3 or even first place? And the biggest recommendation I have is to follow the rules of the tournament. I think
it seems so simple.
Yeah, it does. And when you're hyped up and man, I got all this, I know where the fish are, I know what I'm going to use. But I took for granted at the captain's meeting a little detail for that particular tournament. We're not supposed to share information via electronically. That means through text, through phone call, and even Facebook. And I put a post up of a nice 29 or 30 inch red that I got before I went to weigh in, and the tournament director saw it. Somebody had reported me and said, that's in violation of the rules. I have to disqualify you. I didn't say where I was or what I caught it on or any of the details, but it didn't matter. The rules are the rules are the rules, and you have to abide by them. It cost me 4th or 5th place in that tournament. And I still look back and think, man, that's something that's part of the preparation, rule that it was an oversight on my part.
And so in this case, real quick, you couldn't even text a friend a picture and, hey, here's what I caught before the weigh-in.
No, whether they were competing in it or not, I couldn't communicate with anybody during the tournament unless it was an emergency and, a girlfriend or a family member calls you in the moment and it's an emergency. You can justify that. But anything else recreationally during the tournament hours up until 3 p.m. at 3:01, it's saying do whatever you want. But up until that time, there was a point. It was very, very, they're very strict about it.
And of course, if there's a family emergency, you're probably not going to say, well, hey, you know what? I got something important to tell you. Let me tell you about this area where I just caught this monster redfish.
Yeah. It's totally different. But
it's horrible.
The rules are big. And another one would be measuring your catch. So in most tournaments, unlike, there's Pro Elite series, there's the Boss Man series where you actually get your 2 slot redfish, you keep them in the live well, you take them to the ramp. But most kayak tournaments, all of kayak tournaments really are catch photo release. And in order to prove that you catch that fish the day of the tournament, you're given a token. And that token could be a chip, it can be a wristband, it can be a picture, it can be anything. But a lot of times you need to lay it very clearly on the fish or in the picture to prove that you caught that fish the day of the tournament. And I know a lot of very skilled anglers that would have cleaned house with me if they had not lost their token the day of the tournament or the day before the tournament and they're panicking. A friend of mine, Wade Hollowell, years ago, back in 2014, we did a tournament, and in the first 45 minutes, he got a 30-inch trout. And we were like, oh my gosh, none of us are going to be we should just give up now. And we found out a couple minutes later that he was going back in his pictures just to make sure everything was right. And he goes, oh no, I can't see my token in the shot. This fish is not going to count. And it didn't. And I actually won that tournament. but it is super important to have your token, whatever that thing is, very clearly. And sometimes the rules will even say it has to be on the fish or just has to be clear and visible in the picture. So the token is big, and measurements. You learn over time how to get the right angle to make sure you have the right measurement on your fish. Sometimes a matter of a quarter of an inch, and some tournaments measure up to half an inch, or they round up to a solid inch, or they'll go down to an eighth sometimes in championships. But a quarter of an inch difference and an angle of catching, the photo of that fish on the bump board or the measuring device that you're using is everything. A quarter of an inch can mean a difference between first and second place. So, you always have to make sure that sometimes rules are explicit and say the head of the fish has to be up against the bump board at 0 and the tail needs to be pinched or unpinched. And every little thing with those rules can make a difference on whether that fish even qualifies for that tournament. So please, please, please read the rules. Know them, forwards and backwards the night before you launch or get out there and fish. And it may end up, saving you in the big run. And
protect the token like it's the most valuable thing on your person. Right? It's like showing up to the airport without your cell phone these days. Like, what how am I supposed to find this person?
Or a passport. It's like going to the airport, going to fly internationally. You're like, oh, I don't have my passport, but that's fine, right? No, it's not fine. Don't do that. I put mine in a Ziploc baggie. That's the best way to go about it. Ziploc baggie. That way, if it does fly off, you'll be able to catch it. It's not going to sink. It'll float away and it'll stay dry. That's been the easiest thing for me. It's inexpensive and it's quick. Cool.
So what else? I'm guessing location is going to be an important one. Like, let's talk about that because a lot goes into that. I know some people who have the time to go pre-fish areas. Some people just have to spend a lot of time on Google Maps and doing a lot of time and research on a computer, satellite maps. What's your feedback there in terms of where do people go wrong when it comes to all the pre-trip planning?
So that was the biggest grind for me when doing tournaments, was trying to figure out where to go, because you have 8 hours in these tournaments and you'll often know by 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, regardless of tide or conditions, you'll know by 9 o'clock whether you're going to do well or not based on what you've caught up at that point in time. The first 2-3 hours of the tournament are crucial. After that, it's Hail Marying, swinging for the fences and hoping you find a quality fish. But I would pre-fish a lot. I felt that had a big effect on how I was going to do in the tournament by knowing ahead of time. Sometimes I would take 3 days or 4 days off of work the week leading up into the tournament and use my paid time off to go and scout areas. In particular, in IFA tournaments, if it was a West Coast tournament, like the weigh-in would be in Ruskin, for example, you can fish anywhere on the West Coast of Florida. That could be the Panhandle. That could be all the way down to the Everglades. And with a catch, photo, release tournament, as long as you were back at the weigh-in by 3 p.m., you were safe. But that's so much area to fish, and the tides vary dramatically from Crystal River down to Fort Myers, that you really need to time all of the weather conditions, your tides, and just knowing whether there's fish there ahead of time before you even choose to fish in that tournament. And it's tough. It's a lot of road time. It's a lot of physical time on the water. But an everyday angler, somebody that just goes out and fishes on the weekend, can still go out in a tournament and do really well if they were to keep log of all of their catches over the different seasons and all their conditions. We have on the insider community, taking note and log of where, when, all the conditions, what color lure, and just notes on your success for the day. That time on the water and that experience makes a big difference in the moment. Even if you don't have a chance to pre-fish, that's going to come in handy. But for me, having those 2 or 3 days before the tournament to poke around at different launches and time how long it would take for me to launch, get to the area that the fish were on different tides, and then compensate on the day of the tournament is big. I found that if I was going and swinging blind, it was really 50-50. Either I completely strike out or I get lucky based on my previous experience in that area around that time. And we get a nice, 30-inch red and like a 25-inch trout, get 55 inches combined between the two and, take home first. But Location, location, location. You know, we've said it many, many times. Like, you could have everything on you, all the right lure and the right lure, the right leader, the right everything out there. But if you're not where the fish are, it's not going to make much of a difference. One thing I'll point out that helps a lot in location is actually it's networking. The people that you meet in tournaments, for anybody that goes out and does their first tournament, or anybody that's done a couple tournaments, will say that it can be a little intimidating when you do it, because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going up against all these other people. There's Tony Lai, there's Derek Engel, there's Eric Henson. There's all these people that are just veterans in the tournament scene, and they're really, really good fishermen. But initially, you might have this competitive nature about yourself to not communicate or not talk to the guy next to you, or you feel like you have to keep all your secrets to yourself. When in actuality, the best thing you can do is to communicate with everyone, to make friends, whether it's for whether you do well in that tournament or not. It's going to behoove you, because anglers do rely on each other and communicate to help one another. In the 24 hours leading up to the tournament, you might help a friend and say, hey, they're in this general area, and you might have your own game plan. But believe it or not, it's actually counterproductive to keep to yourself and not communicate with anyone. I've been very fortunate to do well by having a good network and communication base of people that I touch base with to say, what were they biting on today? I might not say, where are you going? Because that's the secret sauce. You're not going to divulge that. Yep. But they might say, hey, I had a lot of good hits on topwater today. And then the day on pre-fishing, I might find out topwater is king. And I would not have known better if I didn't have that little tidbit of information. So your network of people you talk with help a lot. It can mean the difference between getting a bite and not getting a bite sometimes.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the insider community. That was almost kind of an afterthought. We wanted a community that was off Facebook for a lot of reasons, but now like it is a network, right? And not just for tournaments, but just maximizing your time. Every day I see there's posts like on a Tuesday, Wednesday, hey guys, I'm going out this weekend with my kids or my boss or coworker, family, in-laws, and I want to make sure we get them on some fish. What are you guys seeing? And to your point, it's not about like giving you a GPS spot. It's just like our smart fishing game plan video that we do every single Friday. It's talking about the trends. Like, hey, here's the types of structure they've been on. Here's the types of depths that they've been on. Here's kind of the overall trend of what these redfish and snook and trout and flounder are doing. And it's incredibly helpful. I know C.A. Richardson, he was one of our original fishing coaches, and he always said that because he was a tournament guy for, almost 2 decades. And he's like, it's all about the network. He's like, it's all about who you know. And Kevin Van Dam, and I remember that one article talking about how much money he spends out of his own pocket just to get people on certain lakes to give him intel, which I believe is legal to pay someone for intel. They just can't obviously be on your boat and stuff. And he would pay some of the local good old boys on some of these lakes that are out there every day, 10 grand in some cases I saw, just to tell them what's going on. I mean, it's all about that network.
It's just so true.
Anything to give them an edge. And obviously, the tournaments that you're fishing and the ones we're talking about for Inshore saltwater, not quite as big as the big boy bass tournaments where there's hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line and sometimes more. But still, you don't, if you get a chance to win 1,000, what's some of the big ones? 5,000? How big do they get now? 10?
In the kayak world, I think there's one coming up. I think it's the Goat Pygmy tournament in the Panhandle, and I think that's 10 grand.
It's a lot.
And I think there has been a 10 grand plus tournament on the kayak bass side of things. The bass industry is, starting to wheel and deal in the kayak world. I don't quote me, but KBF might have had one that was 20,000 or more. I mean, it's crazy to see how far that's come over 10 years of, making a milk crate and a rod and going fishing to now it's tens of thousands of dollars in tournament winnings. But yeah, hiring a guide for an area that you're not familiar with is common practice leading up to the event. There are some guides for each region and area that are willing to take you out and show you the ropes of just things to consider. Like if you had never fished Steenhatchee before, it's a unique fishery. There's popping corks, there's mirrodines, there's a lot of people use gulp up there. Certain things work well on those fish in that area. And certainly hiring a guide and a professional helps give you some tips to put in your back pocket the day of the tournament. So I remember over in Amsterdam for the Hobie Worlds, the Aussies actually booked out guides for 2 or 3 days in the area, because for that tournament, you weren't allowed to fish on the body of water, I think 1 month leading to the tournament.
Wow.
So the Aussies had to, anybody, I mean, there are people from Scotland and England that would hire guides in lakes surrounding that lake so that they could find a way to have an advantage come the tournament, because it's a 3-day tournament. So, I mean, you're grinding for 3 days. And we all found out pretty quick that the water in Amsterdam is pretty dirty everywhere, and that's actually really good. Zander, which is like a type of walleye, they're like mutant walleye. They get 40 inches plus, and pike and perch. They get big over there, but having dirty water, those big pike they're a little less wary at striking at something if they can't see it. And the Finkenveenplassen, which is where we were fishing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So the Finkenveenplassen is very, very clear. We were fishing like 70, 80, 100 feet of water, like 100 yards from the shoreline, and it's crystal clear. So all that experience that these guys had fishing dirty water did not apply to the area that we were fishing, and nobody would have known because they weren't allowed to get onto it until the day of the tournament. So that was a unique case. But certainly, if you wanted some information, hiring a local guide, supporting their business, and those tips will help you the day of.
Cool. So let's stay on this pre-trip planning part, because it's so critical. When you're on, let's just say not the on the water fishing, this is the off the water fishing, looking at satellite maps, how many different types of spots are you trying to pick? Is it 3, 5, 100? And are you trying to go for, you mentioned like throwing the Hail Mary, there's always that, all right, do I just want to get quality, or do I want to get quantity and just know I can at least get 1 trout and 1 red or 1 snook or flounder, whatever kind of tournament is on the board? What's the mindset there? Because a lot of that is stuff that's tough to teach, right? You go out there and try to get a record trout or snook or red, or you just try to like, man, let's get something on the board and build from there.
So it's about numbers. It's about total inches in the big scheme of things. And you take into consideration the area that you're fishing. I'll take the West Coast, for example, because that's a lot of fun. You've got tides as opposed to the East Coast, where if you know little honey holes in Mosquito Lagoon or the river or ponds to go into, there's always big fish, and it's, they're just resident fish that never leave. But on the West Coast with tides and seasons, fish have fins and they're moving over the flats all the time. I would look at it like this. If you know that the redfish are going to be in a general area, and I try to make sure that I can get both species in the same area and that I don't have to go back to my car, load back up, and go to a second spot in the tournament. The only time I would fish 2 different areas is if I knew from practice that I'm not going to find both fish in the same area. If you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, you're in really good standing. And I would try to focus on, if I were to look at an aerial map to scout and pick an area, and I'm going for trout, I find potholes. I find grassy, expansive flats with potholes. And I need to figure out, okay, if I've got a lot of area to cover, I need to figure out my big search tools, what top water or big paddle tail. Guys, the 5-inch bomber, I mean, I think I've said it to you, Joe, and other guys, that 5-inch bomber, that color and that size is my number 1 favorite lure to cover the flats for big trout specifically. That color, it matches with the color of the water. It looks like any big pilchard, profile or a finger mullet of that size. It's money, clear skies or cloudy conditions. That bomber, I think, is understated. And I really want to bring more attention to it because, that color, and then like a Houdini natural color were the 2 that I would throw. And I've won tournaments, and I've gotten 22 to 25-inch trout in tournaments throwing that color and that profile when I need to have the wind in my back and cover from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, just cover the whole flats and hit those potholes and hit those little dips in the grass where there might be a prop scar. And topwater lures and a 5-inch paddle tail like the bomber were key.
And to be clear, this is the Slam Shady bomber, the 5-inch Slam Shady bomber. Yeah, the
Slam Shady bomber.
Do you like to rig it up on one of those weedless weighted hooks, or are you doing a jig head?
Always weedless weighted for me. A lot of my bigger trout are going to be over grass. And if you have an exposed jig head, you're just going to, every other cast, you're going to run the risk of getting snagged up on it. So, I think the best pairing, if I, whether I want to go slow or fast with the paddle tail, I think that the 4/0 1/8 ounce owner weighted twist lock or even the 5/0 eighth ounce, or even the 5/0 quarter ounce. There's 4/0 to 5/0 sizes where the money size is to match with that bomber. You get a little bit, the hook goes back a little bit further on the plastic. So if you do get a trout to short strike, you're going to have a better chance of hooking up to him with a little bit longer bit on that hook. And eighth ounce to quarter ounce seem to be the size. I would prefer to stay with an eighth ounce weighted size for covering flats from 3 feet up to, a foot. That's kind of the range of the flat that I'm looking for. But to answer your question, what am I looking for on Google Maps and just like aerial overhead view of an area? Grass, potholes for trout. Those are the big things. And if I'm going to go for bigger trout, I found that East Coast, West Coast, if I want a trout over 20 inches, a lot of times I'm going to get shallower than you would think. I'm going to look for those bigger trout in areas that you would find those 27-inch, 30-inch redfish. The bigger 20, 22 plus inch trout are going to be up in a pothole that's just a little bit shallower than those deeper 3 or maybe even 4 foot flats. But I always try to put fish on the board. Just get fish on the board. The staple would be get a 20-inch trout or as close to a 20-inch trout as you can within the first 1 to 2 hours of daylight in that tournament. And then I would spend the rest of my day scoping out a couple different areas for redfish. Because once the sun got high, your big trout opportunity is gonna decrease.
Cool. That was going to be one of my questions. Have you ever fished tournaments with like the full slam where you got either a flounder or a snook as the third fish?
Mm-hmm. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have the same mentality as, hey, I want to go catch at least the trout first? Is that usually always it? It's the kind of the easiest, if you will, in general, or no?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say trout tend to be the pickiest throughout the day. I'm less likely to get unless it's cold. I guess that's the only time that I would reconsider catching, a bigger trout later on in the days if it was cold and it's warming up and everything's going to bite a little bit better when that sun starts beating on the flats. But most situations in tournament season, when it's blowing 10 to 15 and it's sunny or partly cloudy, I try to get my big trout first, and then I'll focus on snook and reds later. Most tournaments are, if you get a trio tournament where you got to get a slam, it's usually snook, red, and trout. And snook, you can get a big snook around structure with shrimp presentations or soft plastic jerk baits worked really slowly in strike zone areas, like docks and deeper oysters with little cuts and passes. If you take the time and you beat it up, those fish are holding tight to structure and they'll stay there. And sometimes you might need to present a lure, 50 or 60 different times in the same area. Eventually, if you know that there's fish there, if you've caught fish there before, likely a snook, for example, is probably still going to be there. And eventually you're going to frustrate it enough to where it's just going to swipe at it. Be like, I'm tired of looking at this thing. Snook do not like to be annoyed. And just something to keep in mind, if you ever snook fish and they're snook in an area, or if you see them and they don't get spooked and they don't leave, keep casting over and over and over and over. Just annoy that fish. They're eventually out of instinct going to be like, get out of my face. And they're gonna eat it, and then you're gonna win the tournament.
Pretty funny. Yeah, it's so true. And sometimes it's even just, I don't know if it's the right moment at the right tide, the right amount of water, certain amount of bait coming in. But I have that bridge. I've posted exactly where this bridge is as an insider report to our insider members. And I go fishing on foot. It's a bridge you can kind of walk to underneath, and there's always snook there. I mean, you could literally, if you're up on top, you can see them down there. And same deal. Like sometimes it's right off the bat, and sometimes I have to make 100 casts, and all of a sudden it's like boom. I'm like, thank goodness. That is so true. Now the bass guys, we've all seen them. We kind of poke fun at them. They go out there in their tournaments and they have, 18 rods, whatever the max amount of rods are allowed to have on their boat. And it's every lure you can possibly imagine, crankbaits and lipless plugs and all that. I mean, it's on and on and on and on. What do you do? Obviously, if we're talking about kayak in particular, you can't have 18 rods. Are you, I guess the overall question is, what's your focus? Is it, all right, I'm going to be a specialist. I know this is my confidence lure. I'm going to try to stick with it as long as I can. Or are you like switching up quickly?
I take no more than 4 rods out there with me. If I think I said in another podcast, if I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know, like, for sure, like the trout are going to be here, the reds are going to be here, I know what they're going to eat, I'll take 3 rods. It's going to be a topwater. It's going to be a big paddle tail like the Slam Shady Bomber, or it's going to be a weedless soft plastic It could be a stick bait, could be like Alabama leprechaun. It could be any sort of jerk bait profile in either, slam shady color or like a natural color, like blackish brown, watermelon red. Those are my three go-to. If I have a fourth with me, the fourth is going to be it'll be a Hail Mary thing, because I've already got 2 lures to cover expansive flats. I've got 1 lure that I know in sight fishing applications I've had the most success with, a weedless jerk bait in natural color or white. I don't know. I think the fourth might be like a Miradine, like a hard twitch bait, in case I am working the bomber or cover the flats with a big paddle tail. If they don't want something moving and they want something that's going to hover and erratically sit in the strike zone, I'll try to find a suspending twitch bait like a Miralure. I think, there's a Rapala. We have a mullet colored Rapala that's like a twitch and wrap that works really well. So usually 4, and those are kind of my setups: topwater, bomber style 5-inch paddle tail, weedless soft plastic natural or slam shady colored jerk bait, and the fourth is suspending twitch bait. I think those are like my 4 go-to.
So how often do you switch them up?
Ooh, very planned in the first 2 hours of my tournament. And I'll kind of explain, like, everything's about a plan. It really is. The first 2 hours of the tournament, it's topwater and bomber style, 5-inch slam shady paddle tail. Those are my go-to. It's get the trout on the board. And hey, if I get a 30-inch red in before I get my trout, that happens sometimes. Those big reds might be just zigzagging across the open flats, and they'll hit a topwater and they'll hit a big paddle tail. But try to get my trout first thing in the morning. And those are my 2 presentations. From about 9 o'clock through the rest of the day, let's say 9 to 12, I'm getting up shallow and I'm targeting redfish or big trout. And I'm sight fishing with that 1 soft plastic weedless bait. That's pretty much what I'm going to have in my pocket, tucked and ready to go at a moment's notice for any fish that I see. So that's kind of my arc. If I don't do well and I've got a big trout, but I'm having a hard time finding a redfish in that last hour or 2 hours of the day, the sun's high, the wind's kicked up, the fish are spread out, and they're not feeding as well as they were in the morning. It's about, it's search and destroy. It is cover as much water as possible. Maybe not with a topwater, but slow rolling that bomber, that slam shady bomber, as slow as I can through the grass and through the potholes. And that is just launch it and pray and hope that a big red picks it up. So that's kind of like the boom, boom, boom throughout the arc of the day, kind of what I'm looking to do. But like I said, if you've put in the time to pre-fish, if you have your network of people, if you've prepared what lures and what colors you're going to throw and plan of when you're going to go throughout the day, by about 8:30 or 9 o'clock, I'll know whether I have 2 really good fish in the boat and I'm sitting happy, and then it's just about upgrading. Or if by 9 o'clock I'm struggling and I've got 1 fish or I've got no fish, I'm still going to stick to that same game plan, because I feel that that's kind of been my route, for the past 10 or 12 tournaments. That's kind of the arc of how my day's gone. But you'll know pretty quick where you're sitting.
Speaking of sitting, how long are you sitting in a specific area? We talked about how often you're changing up the lures. And does it depend, right? If you're in a place where you're just catching a lot of fish, do you move? I know there's been plenty of people who've regretted that, right? Like, oh man, I should have just stayed there where the fish were, and I got greedy and wanted to keep getting bigger fish. But what's the story?
So I had one tournament where if I would have won this tournament, I would have gone to the Hobie Worlds again in 2015. And it was an area that I knew there was a giant school of redfish. And the locals in Tampa Bay, you probably know over time the general haunts of where these big schools of 100+ big redfish will hang out in Tampa Bay. But in a tournament, if you find it, there's going to be 20 or 30 other boats on it beating those redfish up, trying to get 1 or a couple fish for their clients. And I found them the day before the tournament. I could not get them to bite. I threw everything in the kitchen sink. I would give all of my baits a pro-cure bath or a scent bath, just hoping I could gulp and everything, just dead stick a bait in front of this school of fish and hope and pray that one would pick it up. And it did not work out. And I told myself for the day of the tournament that I can't sit in a spot that I know there's fish and they're not going to bite. And that was a mistake, because there was another kayaker that came in from out of town. Joe Comiati came in and he knew where those fish were. And I didn't see him out there the day before. And I said, hey man, I know they're there, but it's tough. Like I wouldn't spend the day doing it. And he did, and he got one, and he went to the Hobie World. So the whole leaving fish to find fish, it's tough. Like I would say if I could go back and do it again, if you know that there's fish there the day of the tournament and they're not biting, they're probably eventually going to bite. I would be hard pressed to leave an area that I know there's fish to go to an area and hope there's fish. And I think that was the case. I went down south to Punta Gorda, where I kind of know there'd be some redfish and trout, and put together, piecemeal my day like I have in the past. And it was a grind, and I got a red and a trout, but I was like 7 or 8 inches shy overall of winning because I didn't get that 35-inch red that made the difference. So definitely I would say poke around and stay in an area that you know that there's fish. All you need is one bite. Could be a 10-second window, a one cast opportunity. But if you can see them, that's big. I keep thinking like, I'm trying to remember your original question, but to answer it, it was, I'm very visual in my tournament approach. And everywhere you fish is different. In the northwest and northeast part of Florida, there might be some areas where the water's dirty and you might not be able to see fish as easy. And it's going to require pre-fishing and hooking up in that area or off this point with current and, looking at aerial maps. But for me, I am only making, when I'm fishing for reds, or if I know there's big trout in an area, I'm only going to cast if I see fish. I'm going to be standing up, and how many areas do I cover when I'm out there? When it's trout fishing, it's a giant flat. I try to find a big open grass flat with little potholes and divots and little nuances. But when I'm fishing for redfish, I take my time and I poke around in areas that, wind protected areas. I know Tony's talked about that a lot, and that's huge. I find wind protected mangrove shorelines. I find thick, rich, lush grass is what I try to find. That's usually where I'm going to find happy redfish that are slowing down. If you spend time and you sight fish, you look for the redfish, and their pec fins are perfectly out and they're slowly moving. They're doing that because they're like, scanning for abnormalities. They're just looking for little shrimp in the grass, as opposed to, redfish that are over sand or against an oyster bar. They're constantly on the move and they're patrolling, and they respond a little bit differently than redfish over grass. That's been the ticket for me. So I'm looking. I'm very visually engaged, trying to find every fish that I'm going to catch. Instead of trout fishing, it's blind casting most of the time. But for redfish and for snook too, I'm not going to cast unless I know I see one.
Straight up hunting.
That's it, man. Stealthy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So what else, man? What are some other mistakes? I know you have your own little, what is it? Your equation is what you called it, right?
Yeah, I've actually said this in articles over the years. I've written a couple different articles about tournament fishing and preparing and my success and talking about the day. And I really think that being successful on the water, whether it's in a tournament or not, it's a formula. And I think that success is preparation plus luck. And if you think about that, in that equation, only one of those things are within your control, and that's preparation. And so I would over obsess about preparation. Did I make sure that my uni to uni or my leader to braid connection is perfect? Are my knots perfect? Did I pick the right color? Am I efficiently organized on my kayak to where I'm not cluttered and looking for something last minute? Sometimes I'll decide if I'm going to change lures 2 or 3 or 4 different times. I keep those lures in the little side rail of my kayak so that they're right there ready to go next to my pliers. And every single minute on the water, I remember, there were times pedaling to the spot, I could feel every heartbeat, and every second of that tournament mattered. So I would prepare and make sure that any lures, my lip grippers, my net. Oh man, for every big trout I've hooked, having a net is priceless. Oh my gosh, you need a good net to make sure that when you get that big 25-inch trout and he's shaking his head next to your kayak or your boat, you run the risk of losing that fish right there. That could be a $2,000 fish. You need to have a net to really quickly get it and secure it and make sure that it's safe. A rubber soft net to make sure it's safe on the fish too is big. But yeah, I think success is preparation plus luck. You don't have control over luck, but you do have control over how much you prepare for things. And Joe, one thing I thought about, I've actually never talked to you about this, but in my tournament endeavor time period, when I was doing really well and I would take first place, At first, I think I thought it might have been coincidence. And then I've thought about it over the years in depth. And I think this is something to make note of. Is actually, I remember on my way to a spot that I fished in Mosquito Lagoon for a kayak fishing classics tournament. I've got a trophy back there. The first tournament I won with the little orange circle, I fished Biolab Road, and I went all the way to the east side of Mosquito Lagoon. I was in great shape. I had a much different mindset. I was super focused on being successful in my plan. And I actually, on my way pedaling to the spot, I prayed. And I had a conversation with God, and I didn't ask to win. I didn't want that. What I wanted is I wanted some clarity, and I wanted the opportunity to be at my best. And I remember having that conversation out loud, pedaling to the spot, saying, please help me be the best that I can be and have a clear mind and clear focus and perform at the best of my abilities. Not for anything special, but just to allow me to be the best that I can be. And I've noticed that in every time that I have had that moment and had that conversation, that I've done well. I think I've won almost every single one.
Wow.
And initially I didn't think too much about it, but over the years and as I got older, I realized that there's something to be said about that, to have faith and to have trust in yourself and trust in things that might be out of your control, but maybe are within your control or within you the whole time. So a lot of it is faith and trust in yourself and your abilities, and knowing that you can go out there and you can be successful is huge. It's not ego. It's humble confidence. So I never share that with you, but that's something awesome. I really think that's something that, that it's within everybody. So just a little token to keep in your back pocket.
I love it, dude. So let's keep going down that path a little bit, because that's kind of about mindset. It's about, you use the word trust. There's also days, and I'm sure you've had them, we've all had them on the water, where you go out there with the right mindset, and you just know it's going to be a great day, and all of a sudden it's not. And now let's just say it's tournament day and it's 10:30, it's 11, you still don't have a fish on the board. This is where people usually collapse. Yeah. Right. You do, like, even worse than Hail Mary, you just completely throw everything out the door and the window, and you're just like a loose cannon. Give some tips there, and not just tournament day, but any given time, just for staying cool, calm, collected, going back to the plan. And what are the mindset tips you have when it gets tough? It's easy to have good mindset when things are going great. It's easy to give praise to God and all that when things are going great, but it's when the tough times, it can be a little bit tougher.
Yeah. Nobody comes out of the woodwork and just has the golden hand and does well from the very beginning. People do well from failure. You learn from your experiences. And there have been a couple tournaments where I grinded for days pre-fishing different areas and struggling to get a bite. Or maybe I had a great time pre-fishing, and then the day of the tournament, I'd see a 28-inch fish, a big redfish. I flip my bait to it. I set the hook, and I get nothing but clean fluorocarbon back, no hook, no lure. And I'm looking at this fish with a plastic in its mouth, and I lost my opportunity. Or I've broken rods. I've broken my Mirage drive in the first hour of a tournament. And it's incredibly discouraging knowing that I'm at a serious disadvantage to do well. And I remember there were probably one or two tournaments that I just was in a really poor mental state and didn't pick myself back up and keep grinding. And over the years, I learned that you have to take a beat, take a breath, and tell yourself that even if you don't do well in this tournament, you should make the most out of it, because you don't know what you're going to learn in those final moments. And that might be the thing that'll help you do well in the next tournament. Everything is a learning experience. You keep your chin up, you take a deep breath, and you push through it, and you try to keep a clear mind about yourself. When you're overly stressed on the water and there's all these different things going on, the wind is in your face, or it's going to start storming, or whatever, something's going to happen. It's a tournament. You just have to acknowledge that you're not alone in that. Everybody else on the water that you're not allowed to communicate with could be going through the things that you're going through, or worse. And you may very well, if you just keep a clear head about yourself. I try to take a beat, I take a breath, I stop everything that I'm doing, and I reassess and say, what's my next move here? Nothing's been going great for me, but I still got 3 hours left, and you never know. I may end up getting a 18-inch trout that I don't think twice about, but it gets me 5th place. You have no idea what everyone else is going through on the water, and you should just focus on giving your best effort, grinding it out and feeling good about it. You know, you're still fishing. It's not the end of the world if it's rough.
Love it, dude.
Yeah.
Well, man, super helpful. This was a really good podcast.
Yeah.
I'm hoping, obviously, if you made it this far, then you love it. But you talk about tournaments. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to do tournaments. And I hope there's a lot of people that listen to this and still listen all the way through, because you drop some like bombs, some gems on just going out there and being consistent and doing well. Good days, bad tides, wind, all the stuff that we always have to, compete with as anglers. So that was super, super helpful. Real quick too, if you like Justin, you like everything you've heard, one really cool thing that we're now doing with our Insider members, we had it was really the next level of membership called the Inner Circle. And it was invitation only. It was a small group of a few hundred people. And we were meeting once a week on Thursdays on a Zoom call, kind of like this, and just to go over everything that's working right now, and really just open it up for live Q&A. And we have people say, hey, I'm not necessarily tournament fishing, but hey, I'm going to be fishing in this area this weekend. What do you guys recommend? We actually get on maps, and it would be like full-time fishing guide, just being there in your back pocket, showing you exactly where to go fishing, what to concentrate on, what's working right now. Incredibly valuable. And we talk about all the time, like if you want to get good at anything, you get coaching, you hire a coach, you get a network, right? This is about networking and coaching kind of combined. And now we're doing that every week for our Insider members. This is something free. It used to be $97 a month, just FYI, to be part of this. And we're giving it free to Insider members right now, doing it every single Thursday. And of course, we record it if you can't make it, and it's so valuable. And Justin's on these calls now. And to me, I think it's one of the most important parts of what we're doing. It's how you leapfrog all your friends. It's how you leapfrog people who are in tournaments. And to me, it's priceless. It's the network plus coaching, and equals you catch more fish.
Success.
Success. You become more consistent. So definitely, please join us if you haven't already. And of course, if you're a member, you can find some details out inside the community where we have the link for the Zoom call every single week. And then all the lures like the Slam Shady Bomber and Miradines, everything we talked about here is at fishstrong.com. That's fishstrong.com.
We got them.
We got them. And it has been tough. And we appreciate your patience. I know it seems like daily we still get emails from people saying, hey, you guys are out of this and you don't have this reel, this rod. It has been so challenging. It has been so tough with COVID. Know that it's not us. Like, we're more frustrated than anyone. We have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of pending orders. Like, we're trying to give them our money. Yeah. Probably like you're saying to us. And it's been such a challenge, but it's getting better slowly but surely. And just know that we are working on this every single day for you. But all that can be found at fishstrong.com, where of course our members, one more reason to become an Insider member, get 20% off everything in the store. And it's proprietary products now, like Blackout Chum and the Power Prawns.
Power Prawn, yeah, for sure.
Woo. Cool, brother. That was so good. Anything else?
No, just, I love doing this with you. I'm happy we could bring some light to it, and reach out to us with questions, guys. We love helping you if we can, helping guide you to be more successful. That brings us a lot of joy, and that's what it's all about. It's about camaraderie and community and helping one another be better. So, super looking forward to talking with you guys, and let us know if you have questions. Comment on this and keep us posted.
Yeah, we love the comments, and definitely do it at saltstrong.com. Under the fishing tips section, that's where all the comments come directly to us, where if it's on Facebook, YouTube, sometimes they come to us, sometimes they don't. That whole social media. It's a little bit crazy out there, but we always get every single comment that comes to saltstrong.com. Just find this exact blog post. You might even be listening or watching on there right now. And at the very bottom, you'll see a place to comment. It comes directly to us. So guys, thank you so much. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. And if you're listening on iTunes or Stitcher, please subscribe, leave us a review. It helps out big time. And of course, join us in the Insider Club, 20,000 plus strong. We've got some really cool stuff coming. This whole Inner Circle, this private coaching and network event that we're doing every single Thursday now has just been game changing. And I can't wait to see you guys on some of those live calls. Otherwise, we are out, and we'll talk to you on the next episode. Peace.
See ya.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.